So year one, this week we will finally be painting our koi fish, and we will be using the different tones that we talked about last week. So that's tones of yellow, tones of orange and tones of red. And if you remember, a tone is the lightness or darkness of one colour. So tones of red will be all the different lightnesses or darknesses of red that you can make. Okay, so last week we practiced making those tones, and today we're going to paint our koi fish. Here's my koi fish. So what I've done is I've turned to my koi fish in my sketchbook. We all need to be using our sketchbooks now. And the equipment I have is a fine paintbrush, red, yellow and white paint. I've got a piece of test paper to try out my paints, a water pot, and some tissue to clean my brush. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top of my koi fish and work down. So that means that if I started at the bottom, I might rub my paint and smudge it all over the place, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to start with the tail of the fish, and I'm going to paint this in tones of yellow. Now, before we start, I just need to mention that, can you see these black lines? If you paint over those black lines, you won't be able to see them. So it's very important that we use the tip of the brush and just try to paint inside the black lines so we can still see them. I'm going to start with tones of yellow, as I say. So I'm going to start with yellow, just yellow on its own. Put a little on my brush using the tip of the brush. I'm going to paint the middle section, and I'm going to go around the edges so that I don't cover the lines. Really careful painting. I don't want to cover the lines. And I'm going to add a little more paint to my brush, and I'm going to keep going carefully around the edges. It's going to take quite a lot of time to do this. And I'm going to do maybe 4 of this bright yellow colour, 4 sections of the tail. In fact, maybe I've changed my mind. I think what I will do is I will paint the whole tail yellow. Now you could either choose to do red or white in the tail, red or yellow in the tail. It's up to you to decide. But what you need to focus on is keeping those black lines unpainted, using the tip of your brush and making sure that you have plenty of paint on your brush. Okay? Good job. Now I'm going to leave you to finish off doing the tail of your fish, and then we're going to think about the body. And on the body, we're going to do all the different tones we can make using these paints. So first of all, I need to wash my brush on the bottom, stroke it on the side, wipe and check that it's clean. And then I'm going to start off by doing red. I'm going to start with just painting red in the first scale here. Make sure it's nice and thick. You're using the tip of your brush. And then I'm going to start to mix the colours. So I'm going to use a little bit of red and a bit of yellow. Now to think, what's going to happen, I'm going to stroke it on the side to get rid of the drips. What's going to happen when I mix red and yellow together? So the colour starts to change, doesn't it? I'm going to add a little bit more yellow now. And you can see I'm not cleaning my brush in between. I'm going to add red and yellow again at the top. And so the colours, when I don't wash my brush, the colours start to mix. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of white, yellow, orangey, red tones there. So I'm going to wash my brush, clean it, stroke it, dry it, and check it's clean. And then I'm going to take yellow again. I want a lighter colour. And this time, I'm going to add red first and then yellow on top. So I'm going to mix those 2 colours together, and it's making an orangey colour. Okay, I'm going to add more red, more yellow, Let's see what happens to the colour. Okay, now I've got a lovely mix of tones there, and I'm going to continue to see if I can change the tones again. So I clean my brush, stroke it on the side, wipe, check, and this time I'm going to add red first of all. Now I've got a little bit too much on my brush, so I'm going to get rid of a little bit of the paint on my paper. Using the tip, going around the edges, and then I'm going to add white this time. So what's going to happen to my colour? Can you remember from our last lesson when we mix white and red together, what happens? Okay, now I'm going to add a bit of red, yellow and white all together. Let's see what happens now. Okay, and what I'm going to ask you to do, Year 1, is to keep doing rows of the scales on the fish and trying to make as many different tones as you can. So you might want to do red and white, you might want to do red and yellow. Each scale, each part of the fish's scaly skin can be a different tone of red, orange, yellow, and I want you to keep going until you've coloured in all of the fish's scales. Okay, once you've done the tail, the scales, then you've got the fin and the two fins, so we've got one fin here and one fin here, and you've also got the head. And I think it would be quite good if you painted the fin one colour. So you can choose yellow or red. I'm going to choose yellow, and I'm just going to paint the fin one colour. Okay, all the way through. I'm going to leave you to finish that. And the same for the head. I'm going to clean my brush, stroke it on the side, wipe, and again I'm going to choose one colour for the head of my fish. Remember, you want to make sure you have plenty of paint. You want the colours to be nice and strong, so you want plenty of paint on your brush. There we go. Keep going. Making sure you're using nice long brush strokes so that the paint is neat. If you rub up and down with the paint, it will look messy. So nice long brush strokes. Fill up the head of the fish and then choose one or two colours for this fin over here. So I've cleaned my brush, I've wiped it, I've stroked it, and I'm going to use red for this section here. And then I think, oh, I want it to be a bit darker, so I'm going to use a bit more paint to make it a nice dark colour. Clean my brush, and then I think I'm going to do this fin here, yellow colour. But it's up to you to choose which colour you want in that section, okay? So, once you have completed all the sections, you should have a fish that looks a little bit like this. Now, once it's dry, you can start to add a few details. You can go over your lines with a black pen. Just let me go and get my black pen to show you. So what I will do is, once I've painted those sections and it's dry, I'm going to start adding little shapes to the fins to make the pattern more interesting. I'm just going to do some flicked lines, and then I'm going to go over the outline of the fish to really make it stand out so it's nice and strong, just in case you've got a little bit of paint on those lines, which is very easy to do. So I'm just going to highlight all those sections on the dry paint and make the pattern a little more interesting, okay? And once you have added all that detail and been around all the edges to make them darker, your koi fish is finished. The next step will be to add the background. Now the background is the space around the object that you're painting, okay? And we're going to be painting this like the sea. But we're not going to be using these paints from a bottle. These are called tempera paints. We're not going to be using those. We're going to be using paints called watercolours, and they are very different to tempera paints. Now, year one, these are my tempera paints, my watercolour paints. If I open up my box, I have these little blocks of colour. And there's a brush inside as well, so I'm going to take the brush, and watercolour paints are much lighter and watery than the paints we've been using up till now. When you use them, you have to mix the colour with water, and what happens is you stroke the colour up and down, and can you see it's changing colour, and I'm rubbing it to get lots of paint on my brush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do lines of that colour. I'm going to keep adding water to my brush, because the paint only moves smoothly if you add water to it. Now it's very important as well that you move in one direction. You can move your brush like it's the sea, okay? So moving it like a wave in one direction. If you do it in lots of directions, it will start to look really messy. So I'm adding blue for the sea all over. And what you might want to do, as the sea isn't just one colour when you look at it, what you might want to do is add a little bit of water and mix in some greeny colours as well. And just add those little waves on top, making sure your brush is nice and wet, making the wave shapes but filling up all of that background colour, and then adding a little bit of a light blue or a green on top to make the wave patterns. Okay, I'm going to keep going, adding the wave patterns. There we are. And what I'm going to ask you to do with your watercolour paints is to paint the whole of the background. And once you have done that, year one, you will have a beautiful looking koi fish a bit like this. So well done, year one. This is a project that's taken 3 weeks to complete, and I imagine that your koi fish are looking beautiful. Off you go. I'll see you later. Bye bye.